I took care of my grandparents for 9 years, then found out they left everything to my cousin who never visited once. Let me start by saying, I don't regret loving them. But I do regret trusting them blindly. How it started. I moved in with my grandparents when I was 12. My mom had a breakdown and left, my dad was never around. My grandparents took me in without hesitation. They gave me stability, structure, love, everything I was missing. I always said I owed them everything. And I meant it. After college, I was offered a job in another city. But just as I was about to accept it, my grandpa had a fall and broke his hip. He needed full-time care. My grandma was already dealing with early signs of dementia. I turned the job down and stayed. I figured, just a year or two. I'd help them recover, get a nurse, then move on. That was 9 years ago. The caretaker years. I became their full-time caregiver. I did their grocery shopping, managed their medication, drove them to every doctor's appointment, paid their bills online, cooked, cleaned, everything. I even worked part-time remote gigs just to stay financially afloat. Meanwhile, my cousin Ryan, 35M, their only other grandchild, visited maybe once a year. Sometimes not even that. Always with an excuse. Oh, I'm so busy with work. Flights are expensive. Grandpa doesn't even remember me anymore. He was charming when he showed up, sure. Said all the right things. Took a few selfies with them for Instagram. Then vanished again. I didn't care. I wasn't doing it for recognition. I was doing it because I loved them. But still, a small part of me thought, they'll remember this. They'll make sure I'm okay when they're gone. Spoiler alert, they didn't. The first sign. When my grandpa passed last year, he was holding my hand. He barely spoke in his final days, but the day before he died, he looked at me and said, "You're the reason I got extra years. Don't ever forget that." I cried for hours after. When we planned the funeral, Ryan offered to help, then disappeared when it came to writing the obituary, arranging the service, or handling any actual responsibility. Typical. Still, I let it go. I was focused on Grandma, whose dementia was getting worse. She passed away 6 months later. That was when everything came crashing down. The will. I got a call from the lawyer. He wanted to meet in person to go over the estate. I assumed it was a formality. I knew they had a modest house, some savings. They'd always told me everything was going to me. That's literally how they phrased it. When we go, you'll have this house. It's yours. I walked into that meeting expecting maybe a house in my name. Or a bank account. Maybe even a letter. What I got was a slap in the face. The lawyer handed me the will. I read the first page, then the second. I reread it. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. But because it was insane. They left everything to Ryan. The house. The bank accounts. The furniture. Their car. Everything. I wasn't even mentioned. Not even a single line. I lost it. I asked the lawyer if there was a mistake. No, he said, gently. They made this revision about 2 years ago. 2 years ago. That's when my grandma's dementia had already progressed and my grandpa was slipping physically. Was my grandma of sound mind when she signed this? I asked. The lawyer hesitated. She didn't sign it. Your grandfather did. Alone. It made no sense. Why would he do that? Unless someone pushed him. Ryan the manipulator. I started digging. Went through my grandpa's emails. Nothing. Checked texts. Then I remembered that my grandpa still used a desktop computer in his study. He barely understood it, but sometimes Ryan would help him with paperwork when he visited. I found one email chain that made my blood boil. Ryan had written to the lawyer with suggested language for a new will. And even more damning, he forwarded an email to my grandpa saying, "I just want to make sure your wishes are clear. You always said you wanted the house to stay in the family. Don't want any outsiders trying to sell it." That outsider was me. I confronted Ryan at the post-funeral gathering. Pulled him aside and said, "You manipulated a dying man to cut out the person who actually gave a damn." He just shrugged. They made their decision. I wanted to punch him. I didn't. The fallout. I tried to contest the will. But I had no proof of undue influence. No medical record saying my grandpa was unfit. No handwriting analysis. The will was airtight. Ryan sold the house 3 weeks later. Didn't even let me take a keepsake from the place I'd lived in for over a decade. When I asked if I could at least keep my grandmother's wedding ring, he said, "Oh, I already pawned it. You should have spoken up sooner." I was speechless. He walked away with nearly $400,000. I walked away with nothing. Not even a thank you note. Healing. Slowly. It's been 8 months now. I'm still living in a rented apartment, working full-time for the first time in years. I'm trying to rebuild. It's hard. Some days I'm angry. Some days I'm just tired. But I've started to understand something. Some people inherit money. Others inherit memories. Ryan might have their house. But I have the last words my grandpa ever said. I have the laughs, the tears, the nights spent reading to grandma when she forgot where she was. I have the real legacy. I don't regret the time I gave them. I regret that they didn't protect me from someone who only showed up for their death. But I've learned. And next time someone says, "Family comes first," I'll ask, whose family? My grandfather left me nothing, or so I thought. Then I found the letter hidden behind the bookshelf. A few weeks after Ryan sold the house, I got a call from one of the neighbors, Mr. Carver, a retired librarian who lived across the street. "Hey kid," he said, "the people cleaning out your grandparents' place left a bunch of old furniture on the curb. I saw their old bookshelf out there. I thought you might want it." It was the bookshelf my grandfather built with his own hands. I didn't even know Ryan had tossed it. So I drove over, loaded it into my car, and brought it to my apartment. When I was cleaning the back of it, ready to refinish the wood, I noticed something strange. One of the back panels was loose. Not screwed in like the rest. I tugged it gently. Behind it was a small envelope taped inside. My name was on the front. In my grandpa's handwriting. The letter. "My dearest Lila. If you're reading this, I hope it means you found the shelf and kept it. You always did love this old thing. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for everything that's about to happen, and everything I couldn't stop. I was sick longer than I let on. My mind started slipping. Your grandmother. I couldn't leave her alone. I knew I couldn't protect both of you from what was coming. Ryan came around one day and convinced me that he should handle everything after I passed. I was tired, confused, scared. And I think I believed he would do right by you. But something in me didn't trust it. So I did what I could. There's an account in your name, opened long ago. Savings I kept aside. Enough, I hope, to help you start again. Ask Mr. Alcott. He knows where to look. I wish I had the strength to change what's coming. But I know you'll find your way. You always do. Love forever. Grandpa. I sat on the floor and sobbed. The secret account. Mr. Alcott was my grandfather's old friend and retired attorney. He had moved to another state a year before my grandfather died, but I found his number on an old Christmas card. I called him and explained everything. He was quiet for a long time. Then said, "I was wondering if you'd ever find that letter. Your grandfather asked me to help set up a custodial account in your name years ago, but told me not to release any info unless you contacted me directly. He asked for ID and a copy of the letter. I emailed everything. 3 days later, he called back. The account still exists. It's in your name. Accrued interest over the years. Do you want to know how much? I braced myself. I thought maybe $5,000. Maybe $10,000. After interest, the current balance is $118,000. I dropped the phone. The shift. For the first time in almost a year, I felt something like relief. Not because of the money, although it was life-changing, but because I knew I hadn't been forgotten. That my grandfather had seen me. Had trusted me. Ryan hadn't won. Not fully. I didn't tell anyone about the account. I kept it quiet. I transferred it into a high-yield account under a new bank and started working with a financial advisor. I made a plan. But I wasn't done. Because the more I thought about that will, the more it smelled wrong. Digging deeper. I remembered the date the will was changed, exactly 2 years before my grandfather passed. I also remembered something else. That was the year Ryan stayed over for 2 weeks to help with repairs while I was away for a friend's wedding. He had been alone in the house with Grandpa. I requested a copy of the signature verification process from the attorney who handled the will. I wanted to know who was present during the signing. Only Ryan. There was no third-party witness, no notarization, just Ryan's assistance with the paperwork. Suspicious? Absolutely. I took it to a handwriting expert. Compared the signature to letters my grandfather had written me. Conclusion: high probability of forgery. A choice. I went to a lawyer. Explained everything. He looked over the evidence, the signature analysis, the timeline. Then said, "You may have a case for inheritance fraud. But it'll be expensive, and messy. And you'll need to be prepared to go to court, and possibly the media." I hesitated. Did I really want to drag this out? Then I remembered Ryan's smug face as he told me he'd sold the house. And I said, let's do it. The confrontation. Before filing the case, my lawyer sent Ryan a notice of intent, giving him a chance to respond privately before we went public. He called me within the hour. "You're insane," he barked. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just done letting you get away with everything." He threatened to sue me back. Claimed he'd done nothing wrong. Said I was obsessed with money. I told him I didn't need his money. That my grandfather had given me more than he ever would. That he was the one obsessed, with control, with appearance, with being the favorite. And then I hung up. The twist I didn't see coming. 2 days before we were set to file, I got a call, from Ryan's ex-girlfriend. She had seen the notice posted online and reached out through a mutual friend. "I have screenshots," she said. "From when Ryan bragged about tricking your grandfather into changing the will." I met her in person. She handed me a USB drive. Inside were dozens of texts. Messages like, "Old man didn't even read the doc. Just told him it was for the house title LOL. I'm not letting her get everything while I get nothing. She's a glorified nurse. Once he's gone, it's all mine." It was the final nail. The resolution. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Ryan backed down. He agreed to a private settlement. I received 60% of the estate's value. He kept what remained of the house sale and walked away quietly. The agreement was sealed to avoid a court battle. But the truth was out. My extended family saw the proof. His reputation was shredded. Last I heard, he'd moved 2 states away. I didn't care. I wasn't in it for revenge. I was in it for closure. Where I am now. It's been 10 months since then. I used a portion of the funds to buy a small home. Nothing fancy. Just mine. I went back to school part-time. And I started writing, about elder care, legacy, betrayal, and love. I still miss my grandparents. Every day. But I know they didn't truly abandon me. Their love was just buried, beneath fear, confusion, and manipulation. And now that it's been uncovered, I can finally grieve them properly. Not as the people Ryan painted them to be, but as the people who gave me a chance when no one else did. The will, the war, and the secrets they took to their graves. After the funeral, the house felt cold, not just physically, but spiritually. 9 years of caring, of routines, of silent dinners, medications, emergency room visits, and sleepless nights, all suddenly ended in a single moment of betrayal. The reading of the will still haunted me. I, Eleanor Smith, leave all real estate and liquid assets to my grandson, Alan Thompson, for his unwavering commitment to family values and legacy. Unwavering commitment. Alan, who lived in Denver and hadn't visited in over a decade. Who only showed up to post photos at the funeral with captions like, "Rest easy, Grandma. Love you forever." The lawyer, Mr. Connors, had avoided eye contact with me the entire reading. But after the rest of the family left, he lingered. "There's another document," he said. "Not legally binding, but it was included in your grandfather's personal safe. Would you like to read it?" I nodded. It was a letter. Written in my grandfather's shaky, barely legible handwriting. "If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. I wish I could say I was a better man. You did more for us than anyone ever has. I'm sorry we didn't do better by you. This wasn't your grandmother's choice. It was mine." That was it. That's all he had to say. No explanation. No justification. Just regret wrapped in cowardice. The confrontation with Alan. I waited a week before confronting Alan. He showed up at the house to check on things, pulling up in a shiny new Tesla with his girlfriend, a woman named Bree who barely looked at me before wandering into the living room and taking selfies on Grandma's antique velvet couch. "So," I said, standing in the doorway, ready to get the house and list it on Zillow. Alan grinned. "Business is business, cousin. But don't worry, I might let you keep one of those creepy porcelain dolls you love." "You're a parasite," I snapped. "You don't deserve this house. You didn't earn any of it." His smile faded. "You really think they'd leave everything to me if they didn't want to? Maybe you weren't as loved as you thought." That stung more than I expected. But I didn't let him see it. "You know what?" I said. "I hope you enjoy every cent of your inheritance. Because that guilt, that will outlive all of it." He shrugged, clearly unaffected. Digging into the past. After Alan left, I started digging. I couldn't accept that my grandparents, especially my grandma, would willingly leave me with nothing. I searched their documents. Tax records. Old journals. Storage boxes from the attic. I even contacted Mr. Connors again to request anything else in their files. That's when I found it. A trust. Quietly set up in 2009, 4 years into my caregiving. It was supposed to allocate $50,000 to me as a caregiver stipend upon their passing. But the trust had been revoked in 2017. Right after Alan's first visit in over a decade. The same year my grandfather suffered his second stroke, and suddenly started keeping me out of financial matters. I confronted Mr. Connors. "Why wasn't this ever mentioned?" I asked. He looked uncomfortable. "Your grandfather insisted it be removed. I warned him it would cause tension." "What changed his mind?" He hesitated. "Alan came to see him. Brought up family legacy, and implied you were planning to put them in assisted living." I was speechless. That was a lie. I'd fought against that for years. I'd given up my own life so they wouldn't end up there. Alan twisted it into a betrayal, and it worked. The rest of the family turns. It didn't take long before the vultures came out. My aunt, who hadn't visited in years, called to ask about some antiques she wanted for sentimental reasons. My cousin Danielle asked if she could use the backyard for her wedding photos before Alan sells it. Even my mom, distant as she'd always been, called to say, maybe this is a sign you need to move on. Stop living in their shadows. Their shadows? They were my life. I took care of them because no one else would. I gave up relationships, jobs, travel, and even parts of myself to make sure they were okay. And now I was being told to move on like I was just some nurse they hired. I take legal action. I wasn't going to let this slide. I hired a lawyer. I gathered everything, the revoked trust, the letter, emails from doctors confirming my role as primary caregiver, and statements from neighbors who saw me taking care of them every single day. We filed a suit, undue influence and elder manipulation. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about truth. The court process was brutal. Alan's lawyer tried to paint me as an opportunist, a bitter relative hoping to cash in. But I had records. Photos. Messages from Grandma thanking me. Handwritten notes from doctors and hospice workers saying I did everything. Even Bree, Alan's girlfriend, ended up testifying. Turns out Alan cheated on her, and she found receipts proving he used the inheritance money to buy crypto and vacation in Dubai 2 weeks after the funeral. That didn't look good in court. The verdict. After nearly 8 months of legal hell, the judge ruled in my favor, partially. Alan kept the house, but I was awarded $125,000 as compensation for services rendered and emotional damages. Not enough to erase 9 years of lost time. But it was something. The house. Alan sold the house shortly after. Ironically, the buyer was a retired couple who converted it into a hospice home. They reached out and asked if I wanted to work with them, help other families navigate what I had gone through. I said yes. Not because I wanted to be reminded, but because I didn't want anyone else to go through it alone. Epilogue. Some days I still visit their graves. Not out of love. Not even out of anger. But to remind myself that even though they failed me in the end, I never failed them. And in a world full of people who talk about family, I actually showed up. That's something Alan will never understand.